Hey everyone, and welcome. When you picture India's fight for freedom, you probably think of huge protests, incredible marches, and of course those iconic political leaders. But what if I told you there's another side to that story? A side written not with slogans, but with numbers, with ledgers, and with hard-hitting economic facts. That's what we're digging into today, the powerful economic critique that really built the foundation for the entire movement. I mean, think about that for a second. It's a wild idea, right? The idea that a revolution could be sparked by looking at things like trade deficits and foreign investment. But honestly, that's pretty close to what happened. The massive push for political freedom was fueled, from the very beginning, by a deep, methodical, and frankly, brilliant investigation into India's economic reality under British rule. Now, here's the thing that might surprise you. This story doesn't actually start with opposition. Nope. It starts with, well, an alliance. You see, the earliest Indian intellectuals didn't see the British as the enemy. In fact, they saw them as a potential partner for progress. I mean, you have to put yourself in their shoes. They looked at Britain, this global industrial powerhouse, and saw a blueprint for India's future. The hope, the very real hope, was that Britain would bring over modern science, cutting-edge technology, and new economic systems to help build up India's own industries. It was supposed to be a win-win. And this quote right here, it just shows you how deep that hope really ran. This wasn't about building a few factories or a couple of roads. The expectation was a complete transformation of the country. They genuinely believed Britain would help rebuild India in the image of a modern, thriving Western nation. They were waiting for a full-blown industrial revolution. But, spoiler alert, that revolution never really showed up. Instead, all that early optimism started to crack, and it was replaced by this growing feeling that something was very, very wrong. The promises just didn't line up with the reality people were seeing every single day. You can see the shift happen over time. After about 1860, intellectuals started to notice that India wasn't just failing to modernize, it was actually going backward in a lot of key areas. And this realization lit a fire. It kicked off this incredibly intense period of study, especially between 1870 and 1905, where a new generation of Indian thinkers started asking some very tough questions. And leading this charge was an incredible figure, Dadabhai Naoroji. They called him the grand old man of India for a reason. He was a successful businessman who spent decades of his life meticulously documenting what he famously called the drain theory. Basically, proving with cold, hard data how wealth was being systematically siphoned out of India and into Britain. Then you have Justice M.G. Ranade. He was the educator, the mentor. As a brilliant economist and teacher, he basically taught an entire generation of Indians why modern industry was absolutely essential for a nation's strength. He provided the intellectual ammo for the movement. And finally, the man who brought the receipts was Romesh Chandra Dutt. Now, this guy had a unique perspective because he'd been a high-ranking official inside the colonial government. After he retired, he sat down and wrote this monumental economic history of India, using the British administration's own official records to build an airtight case against their policies. So, you've got these brilliant minds armed with data and a real sense of purpose, and they all set out to answer the biggest, most obvious question of all. Why was India getting poorer and poorer while being ruled by the richest empire in the world? And let me tell you, this was not some dry academic exercise for them. I mean, just listen to Naoroji's words here. Wretched, heart-rending, blood-boiling. That's raw emotion. They were seeing the human cost of this system firsthand, the poverty, the famines, and their work was an urgent mission to figure out why. And the conclusion they reached? Well, it was revolutionary. They argued that India's poverty wasn't an accident, it wasn't natural, it was man-made. It was the direct, calculated result of economic policies put in place by the colonial government. So what was the central problem? At its core, their argument was this. Colonialism had evolved. It wasn't about just simple plunder anymore. It was way more sophisticated. It was a whole system designed to rewire India's economy to perfectly serve Britain's industrial machine, making India a source for cheap raw materials and a captive market for expensive British goods. Now, of course, the British had their own story, right? A shiny PR narrative about all the progress and development they were bringing. So let's take a look at how these nationalist thinkers took on those claims piece by piece and just tore them apart. Okay, first up, foreign trade. British officials would point to the charts and say, look,
The volume of trade is going up. This proves India is prospering. But the nationalists came back and said, whoa, hold on. The volume doesn't matter. It's the nature of the trade that matters. India was exporting raw materials like cotton for next to nothing, and then being forced to buy back expensive finished textiles from British factories. This one-way street completely decimated India's own world-famous textile industry.
It was the exact same story with the railways. The British held them up as this shining symbol of modernization, but the nationalists saw right through it. They argued the railways were built primarily to help British goods get deep into the Indian market, making it easier to crush local businesses. All the steel, the engines, the investment, every bit of profit flowed right back to Britain.
And the nationalist leader Tilak had this absolutely brilliant, cutting way of putting it. He said, building railways like this was like decorating another's wife. All the work, all the expense, all the effort was making something beautiful, sure, but all the benefits were going to someone else. It's such a powerful way to explain a complex economic point. Okay, so the final big pillar of the British argument was foreign capital. The British line was that foreign investment was absolutely essential for India's development. You even had the Viceroy, Lord Curzon, saying that progress was basically impossible without it. But as you can probably guess, the nationalists had a very different opinion. They just weren't buying it. In fact, they called foreign capital an unmitigated evil. And the reasoning was solid. They argued that it pushed Indian entrepreneurs out of the market. It drained profits out of the country. It gave Britain an even tighter grip on the economy. And, this is a big one, it created this powerful group of foreign investors who had a direct financial interest in making sure British rule never ended. So, you can see all these pieces coming together. This was way more than just a debate between a few smart guys in a library. This detailed, powerful economic critique was about to become the fuel for a massive political movement for independence. These ideas became the pith and marrow, the absolute heart and soul of the nationalist argument. They weren't kept in dense academic books. They were translated into fiery speeches, popular pamphlets, songs, and newspaper articles that anyone and everyone could understand and get behind. And this created a really clear pathway from thought to action. It started with that careful analysis by the intellectuals. Then that analysis was used to educate the public. This created a shared sense of grievance that united all kinds of different people. And that unified movement is what ultimately fueled the powerful demand for political change and economic freedom. And that brings us to a final thought for today. When you look at our world now, with all its complex networks of global trade, foreign investment, and international aid, it's pretty amazing to think about how these arguments from over 150 years ago still echo in our modern debates, right? It's a powerful reminder that if you want to understand the economic challenges of today, you've got to understand the arguments of the past.